On the lathe piece, the potter spreads sand so that the clay pot can easily detach when the elaboration is finished. The clay must be soft and manageable. Hence, it is struck forcefully before removing the excess at the base, leaving the surface ready to begin raising the pot of the jar. Each strip of clay that Antonio molds in successive layers is called a path. The piece must be as even as possible before starting to stretch it to reach the height of the jar. Refining the jar involves removing finger marks, either with a piece of reed or by rubbing with a cloth, until the outer part of the pot is smooth and even. Once the clay has dried, another potter continues with the raising of the jar in what they call echarle al tiesto, throw in the pot. We are adding some joints inside and outside so that the path we have created is stronger and does not come off. The potters call these joints pagauvas, which they use to assemble the clay paths inside and outside. This is finished for now. Now we are going to work it. Working it means smoothing it out so that it is a little more perfect. As we'll see later, we will hit it with a wooden paddle to smooth it. The workpiece must rest for several hours until the clay hardens. When the jar has been aired, Antonio moves on to the paddling, which involves striking the walls of the jar with a wooden paddle to smooth and condition the clay. This is just so it holds on to. It is time to drill the tornera or spout, located at the bottom of the pot, to accommodate the spigot that will regulate the wine's flow. And now what we are forming is the chapel. The upper part, which is the dome, will then get the mouth. The jar continues to rise path by path, working itself in the process. Well, now we are working it, removing the excess clay and smoothing it a bit. Well, we wet it so that the top is a bit more finished and leave it until tomorrow when it hardens a little bit to bear the weight of the mouth. Well, it has been drying for a day. Now it's being paddled to be able to get the mouth. Well, it's finished being paddled, and now we are cutting a piece so that the mouth is centered. It is ready to put the mouth now. The mouth is the opening at the top of the jar. It is a combination of puffs and paste. Grapes similar to those arranged from the pot, except the last one of all. Due to its thickness and shape, the path that finishes the edge of the mouth is called churro. Raphael arranges it by refurbishing the upper contour to give consistency to one of the most enduring parts of the jar. The neckband is part of the final decorations of the jar, which is characterized by a certain austerity in the designs, given its functionality. Raphael wets the clay and rubs it with a chamois cloth to leave the surface smoothed and ready for decoration. The fingers of the hand and the piece of cane are the tools in the ornamentation, a surrounding gourd on the Star of David, symbolic presence that the Morenos have preserved in their pottery as a trademark. The modeling of the jar has come to an end. The piece is ready to rest, dry, and, along with others, move on to be baked in the oven. Entornar, as they say in Torreloncillo, is the process of introducing the jars into the oven and baking them. The arrangement of the pieces inside is conditioned by their volume. The larger cones and the large jars, which differ from these due to their bulbous figure, occupy the first floor of the kiln. Clay is a fragile material. Heat diminishes it. Moisture expands it. That's why, with great care, the potters place the pieces nested among each other with a safety distance that prevents any expansion and perfectly held thanks to the wall wedges and the floor wedges that fix them in place. The largest piece is placed by the potters in the center of the kiln. To prevent the heat from dispersing through the top of the kiln, the potters gradually cover it with broken pieces of previously baked jars on previous occasions. With the interior filled with jars and covered to its height with the remains, the kiln is ready for firing. The fire will burn for approximately 12 hours. Meanwhile, the temperature increase must be gradual to avoid suddenly altering the state of the pieces. A continuous fire that is initially fed with oak due to its slow combustion and is then sustained voraciously with all kinds of firewood. When the firing is complete, it's time to unload. This is what the potters call the process of taking out the jars still hot, checking their baking. The quality of a jar is known more by the sound than by the color. The jars will rest in the workshop arranged for the final treatment. Attaching the jar consists of making it waterproof to keep wine from leaking. Antonio reheats the piece with the torch. Heat on the clay is necessary to melt the material that covers it, insulating it. Rosin or pine resin that replaces the old pitch from which it retains its name. Pitch, which served to caulk ships, cover the interior of wine barrels, and even immobilize broken legs and arms as if it were a cast, gives texture to the interior as it solidifies and guarantees the integral preservation of the contained products. The jars have lost their utility with the advance of synthetic and cheap materials. However, the effort, skill, and imagination required in their making have turned them into an ornamental accessory appreciated by decorators and collectors. The potters of Torrejoncillo continue to work with the same interest and enthusiasm as their ancestors, distinguished by the Star of David, tradition and work that come together in the living craftsmanship of the Valle del Alago.